Hi, and welcome to our peer learning session on the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. I see some folks still ticking in from the waiting room, so I'm going to give it another 30 seconds or so, so folks can get settled, and then we'll get started. Okay, let's get started. Welcome to our peer learning session. My name is Sarah DiVittorio. I'm Director of Conservation Connect for the National Forest Foundation. Our program fosters and supports collaborative forest stewardship efforts, working in close partnership with the Forest Service, as well as many partners and communities all over the country. I want to also acknowledge my colleague, Jane Mandala, who's our NFF Conservation Connect associate. Jane's been kind of the main driver of our planning and logistics for today's session, and is also available to help if you have any tech issues today. So if that happens, you can send her a chat via the Zoom chat. That's Jane Mandala. This is the second session in a series of 12 anticipated peer learning sessions, and today we'll be exploring collaborative process dynamics. So we'll say more about some specific objectives in a moment. Want to also mention that this peer learning session is being hosted by the National Forest Foundation in partnership with the Forest Service's Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. I hope it's a beautiful day wherever you're joining from. As I go through my introduction, please feel free to say hello and introduce yourself in the chat. It's always nice to know, get a sense of who else is on with us today. The National Forest Foundation engages Americans in community-based and national programs that promote the health and public enjoyment of the 193 million acre national forest system. So in addition to leading forest conservation and responsible recreation efforts, the NFF also leads and fosters collaborative forest stewardship efforts that create shared conservation solutions. Just a little bit about who we are. Some housekeeping for today's session. We are recording. There will be a recording available on our website. If you have questions, we'll just be using the chat box for those, and we will have opportunity for some Q&A from the audience. All registered participants will receive a link to today's recording, speaker presentations, and some follow-up information. And that will include a short feedback survey. So when we close the meeting today, it'll pop up on your screen, and then you'll also get a follow-up email with a short survey. Any feedback that you provide will help us improve the series going forward. You also have opportunity to suggest future topics. So we'd really appreciate your input there. Okay, to get started today, we have sort of a fun poll to take the temperature of how folks are feeling about collaboration coming into this peer learning session. That should pop up on your screen. I don't see it yet on my screen.
Do others see it? I'm not sure if it shows up for host.
You do see it.
We can see it.
Okay.
Or I can at least.
Thank you.
Jane, I may need your help because I can't see it. I think I used to be able to. They changed a little bit how polls work in Zoom. So I might need you to share it, the results.
I can do that. I haven't seen anyone answer yet. And give it just a little bit more time. So Sarah, I'm not actually seeing any results. Maybe I could put this in the chat and collect answers that way.
Let's do that.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay, well, something to troubleshoot for our next session. All right, I'm going to keep moving then. And so the poll question, actually, Jane, can you go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll read it out. And if folks have a minute, they can respond via the chat.
Sure. And actually I do have results here. It looks like it did work. It just wasn't showing up on my end. So the poll question was, how are you currently feeling about collaboration, with the options being jaded, cautiously optimistic, positive, excited, or other? And let me see if I can put the results. If not, I can just read them out loud here or put the results in the chat. We'll see if that works. Otherwise, why don't I just share my screen really quick and you can see.
Yeah, let me stop sharing.
All right, can you see those?
No.
Okay, 1 second.
Yep, there we go. All right, so it looks like we have 6% of folks are feeling a little jaded, 28% are feeling cautiously optimistic, 46% feeling positive, 20% feeling excited. That's great. So we can go ahead and close that. And I will reshare my screen with our slideshow. Okay, so moving on. Session objectives today. As we all know, collaboration plays a really critical role in many forest management efforts, and particularly and increasingly those that span large landscapes where there are complex challenges and many interested parties and often multiple landowners and different values to consider. So today's session objectives are to learn about considerations for standing up and maintaining effective collaborative processes over time, provide some practical tools, discuss common questions and challenges, and share experiences to help groups navigate collaborative process dynamics, and share information and learn from one another as a collaborative, I don't know what word that was, as a community of practice for collaborative forest stewardship. We're really excited to welcome the following speakers. Bryce Esch and Lindsay Buchanan of the Forest Service's Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program will be on with some program updates. Tyler Beaton with the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute will overview some recent research findings on collaborative dynamics and durability. And we've invited, representatives of two CFLR projects to provide a brief overview of their efforts. So Dana Gwynn and Jeremy Marshall will be on representing the Rio Chama CFLRP, and Mike Croteau and McCree Anderson will be on representing the shortleaf bluestem CFLRP. And then we'll hold a panel discussion with some prepared questions and opportunity for audience Q&A. And during that session, we'll dive a bit further into experiences with collaboration, focusing again on the collaborative process dynamics. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And at this point, I'd like to welcome Lindsay Buchanan and Bryce Esch from the CFLR program to provide some background and updates.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. And hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Buchanan. I serve as the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program Group Lead with the Forest Service. And as folks who've been involved in the CFLRP space know well, collaboration and the collaborative process really are at the heart of this program, both in terms of its intent, as well as our ability to collectively see the impacts and results that we've seen both on the ground and in communities. And at the same time, that does not mean that it's easy work and that it's not dynamic work that shifts and changes over time. So really looking forward to learning together today, appreciate our speakers and their willingness to share their stories, and really want to also recognize the perspectives and expertise that you all are bringing into the room. So thank you for that. Before we dive in, I wanted to briefly share that we are currently accepting applications for a permanent position on our Forest Service CFLRP team. That'll be open at least through Monday. So I'll put a link in the chat. Very briefly, it's the Assistant National Coordinator role. So this is someone who's charged with providing programmatic and technical support to the program and to our practitioners. So check that out, share it around, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. In other program happenings, I'll note that our annual reports are due December 15th this year. And these reports are really intended to reflect your shared work over the last year, your successes and lessons learned. So those all get posted to the CFLRP website, and we'll be sure to sort of come back and share out on themes and trends that emerge from across the CFLR projects on a future peer learning session. And with that, I will pass it over to Bryce.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. My name is Bryce Esch. I'm the National Coordinator for CFLRP. And I'm just going to share my screen here and tell you a little bit about the context of collaboration within the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. So I think, as many of you know, CFLRP was created by law in 2009 to encourage collaborative science-based restoration on priority landscapes. So collaboration is right there in the core principles of the program. How else does the law define collaboration? Well, the CFLRP legislation defines it as including multiple interested persons, representing diverse interests, as transparent and non-exclusive, or meeting the requirements for a resource advisory committee. And then additional definition is in the 2012 planning rule, which includes diverse interests for sharing knowledge, ideas, and resources, and working together in an inclusive and cooperative manner towards a common purpose. The CFLRP legislation also includes details about what collaboration should look like and how these projects should talk about collaboration in their proposals. So the strategy for the projects needs to be developed and implemented through a collaborative process. When CFLR projects put in a proposal, they have to describe their collaborative process in that proposal. And then the FACA committee that reviews those proposals needs to take the collaborative process into consideration when they're making their evaluation. Additionally, the legislation requires multi-party monitoring for 15 years, that multi-party being the element that is including partners and including collaborators. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, really, collaboration can take place in a varying spectrum. So differences in formality, governance, and organizational approaches across the projects that are in this program. No two projects are doing it the same way. So these are differences in organization, whether they're organizing in multi-level structures to more loose networks of partnerships. There is variety in the existence of governance or existence and use of governance documents, how people do their decision-making, the levels of partner and Forest Service engagement in the collaboration in those groups and decision-making, and then differences in facilitation and administrative support, and how often folks meet. We've compiled a lot of best practices around collaboration. This slide has a good amount of words on it, and I'm not going to take the time to walk through everyone, but these slides will be available to you after this presentation. We have a lot of resources on collaboration, and there's been a lot of research diving into this. So if you're interested in more resources on best practices in collaboration and what kind of research has been done on collaboration, we're happy to share those. So this is a snapshot of what our collaborators look like at this time. As of last year, there were 650 unique organizations and individuals engaged in CFLRP. And those partners tended to be local and regional organizations and entities. But we also have these national groups that you're probably familiar with, like the Nature Conservancy and Trout Unlimited, that engage in CFLRPs across the country. And then this pie chart is a few years old, but I think it's a good representation of the diversity of types of groups that engage in our collaboratives. We just like to show you all the difference in perspectives that are coming together in these projects. And lastly, we do have a resource library on our website. The link is there on the slide. We'll go ahead and drop it in the chat as well. This is where a lot of that research and looking at and collating best practices and things like that has been compiled together in this library. So we'll share that. It's a great resource for more information. And of course, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us. But honestly, I think that the conversation today is going to be full of great perspectives and great resources. So I'm really looking forward to listening to our panel and speakers. I think that's it for me. I'll pass it back to you, Sarah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Bryce and Lindsay. Great foundation for our conversation today. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Tyler Beaton of the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute, where he's a senior program manager. Tyler, over to you.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And I think Jane's going to be driving the presentation, so I'll give her a minute to set that up.
Yep, sorry, I'll just 1 second. I'm share my screen here. How does that look?
Looks great. Thank you, Jane. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Like Sarah said, my name is Tyler Beaton. I'm a program manager at the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute, one institute of a larger group of institutes called the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institutes, and I'll chat about those in just a minute. But I was asked to come today and talk a little bit and set a little bit of context around collaborative governance, dynamics, and durability. Our group has done a series of research around this space, and I'm going to specifically highlight a couple different diagnostics that you can use or think about using for self-evaluation and thinking about how what are the different processes and structures that you need to maintain collaborative progress and performance. So I just want to acknowledge all the partners that make all this work possible. So we do this work with Tony Chang, Chaska Waiwaka, Melanie Colavito, Nikki Von Hedeman, and Tara Teal. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institutes, or SWERI, is a group of 3 university-based institutes that were developed through an act of Congress in 2004. And really our bread and butter, we're all a little bit different, each of our 3 institutes, but our mission and mandate really is to be a bridge between science and management and bring science into collaborative spaces and use that to develop and co-create locally relevant actionable knowledge to inform forest and fire management strategies. Next slide, please. So just to set the stage a little bit and provide a couple of definitions up front, just so everybody knows where I'm coming from with this, is I just wanted to first define collaborative governance. So this just refers to the processes and structures of decision-making and management that engage people across boundaries, essentially to carry out something that couldn't be carried out alone. And as Lindsay, I think, mentioned at the very beginning, collaboration is dynamic, and change is a fundamental aspect of collaboration that occurs throughout a collaborative's existence. So it really requires collaboratives to be very adaptive and durable, and specifically thinking about how to adapt those structures and processes to changes that are either internal to the collaborative or external to the collaborative. Next slide, please. In that context, we know that collaboratives are dynamic and they evolve and they provide value in different ways at different times. The resources and capacity needs that they have are going to change with time as well. So it's really important to have these diagnostics or tools that folks can use to self-assess or to monitor what are those changes in collaborative dynamics and outcomes through time. So I'm going to talk about one that we've administered for program-wide for the CFLRP assessment and provide a little bit of context around that. But then there's also diagnostics to think about situating collaborative needs and benchmarks for success relative to their life cycle, relative to where they are at in the stage of collaboration. And I want to introduce a concept called the collaborative readiness framework as well. Next slide, please. Oh, and sorry, so I thought I got rid of all the animations, Jane, but the goal of this is to identify what are the forces and factors and that can facilitate the evolution and sustainability of a group. Okay. All right, so the first diagnostic here that I want to introduce is the SWRI, or the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institutes, which I introduced, were asked to develop an online and confidential questionnaire to address this issue of collaborative governance and durability as part of the common monitoring strategy. So what we wanted to do is make sure that whatever instrument that we developed, whatever methodology we developed, was really grounded in the findings from the first 10 years of the CFLRP. We also grounded it in a lot of the literature that's come out related to the CFLRP, but also external to the CFLRP. This assessment is a program-wide assessment, so we'll be looking at this question around collaborative dynamics and durability program-wide in aggregate, but also providing very detailed local results and feedback with individual projects. And the key point here is, because change is such a fundamental and reoccurring aspect of collaboration, we've set this up in a way for it to be longitudinal so that we can identify what is working well, what maybe needs some improvement, and to monitor those changes through time as folks adapt and evolve. Next slide, please. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to, have to go one more, please, Jane. When we pulled together this questionnaire, we really wanted to frame it within the history and practice of collaborative governance. So we used this framework that really synthesized the state of the science on collaborative dynamics and durability. So it's a systems-based framework, which I like because it really demonstrates what Bryce was saying earlier, that collaboration is mandated through the CFLRP, but it's situated in local places and context. And there's many different variables, both within and external to the collaborative, that are going to affect how a collaborative actually operates. So what I'm going to focus on here is primarily the collaborative dynamics, because that's pertinent to what we're going to talk about today. And specifically, I'm going to walk through a few of the different components and illustrate what at least the practice and theory has said to date around what are those things that can contribute to good governance and good durability. Next slide, please. So, and you can advance through those. And so essentially, before I get into those individual components, it's also important to recognize that there's factors internal and external to a collaborative that really affects performance and progress. So things external to the collaborative or internal to the collaborative, like participant turnover, changes in funding, internal conflict or disruptions. And then things outside of the collaborative, like big wildfires that have impacted planning units and caused collaborative groups to have to change their plans kind of midstream. Injunctions on forest management activities. And then more top-down legal and political factors that may affect collaborative governance are changes in administrative direction, changes in budget priorities. And I think what we've all felt and still in many ways are continuing to feel the effect of global pandemics like COVID-19. Okay, next, please. So now I want to walk through each of these collaborative dynamics that we use to kind of situate our questionnaire, and I'll just give a brief introduction to what these are. And these are, again, just kind of the attributes of good governance and durability. And then I'll provide just a high level takeaway from some of the results that we have so far for this questionnaire that we developed. So principled engagement really just refers to having the right people involved. So that's a representative cross-section of those people who have a stake in the issue or involved. And they're involved in iterative and inclusive dialogue throughout planning, implementation, and adaptive management. To determine those shared problems, to identify shared strategies to solve those problems, and to have some shared agreement about what is your underlying purpose. And as also as Bryce mentioned, collaboration was mandated throughout the CFLRP. However, it was a little vague for very good reason in terms of how collaboration would actually unfold on the ground. So it wasn't prescriptive. What that means is it allowed groups throughout the country to develop and engage in collaboration in the way that met their local contexts and histories. But what it also meant is that you have very different expectations from people who are part of these collaboratives about what they expect from collaboration throughout planning, throughout implementation, and throughout adaptive management. And what we heard from some of our survey results is that really aligning those different expectations was a real key to continuing to make progress in the durability of the group. And then within this same vein, there was a lot of calls for increased engagement with underrepresented groups in locally appropriate and sensitive ways. Next slide, please. So the second component is called shared motivation. So this is trust and relationship building, key components of collaboration, mutual understanding, internal legitimacy, and commitment to the collaborative process. There was very strong agreement across the board from the reports from the results that we have to date that the collaborative process with CFLRP has really helped build trust and relationships and mutual understanding. But with any collaborative that's ongoing, there's a number of factors that can undermine or cause some distrust or cause some loss in relationships, things like personnel turnover and limited capacity to engage. So a big recommendation that we hear is the need to develop a robust transition strategy. So periodically revisiting and reaffirming your roles and commitments and expectations, having a series of onboarding workshops, having extra time at meetings to go over ground rules and meeting objectives, having redundancy in roles and positions, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. So the last component of this collaborative dynamics piece and kind of what we hear is what are the components of good governance are having strong collaborative leadership, having a commitment and to joint knowledge building and learning and adaptive management, resources, not just people and time and funding, but facilitation resources, technical capacity and expertise. And then the fourth one, which I want to talk just a little bit more about, is institutional arrangements. These are kind of the rules of the game. And those should be both accountable, they should be transparent, and they should be responsive. And some of the challenges or things that folks are really noshing on right now is having these clear plug-in points or sideboards on what is the collaborative decision space. So where and how can groups inform decisions? And also having responsiveness, both on the collaborative side, from the collaborative leadership, but also on the agency side, and being responsive to collaborative input, and having clarity on what decisions can be made and what can't be made, and what decisions were made and why were they made. So essentially having a clear documentation and understanding of what to expect, when, how folks can contribute, and then if and when they contribute, how will their contribution affect decision making? Next slide, please. So that was kind of the nuts and bolts and a very quick overview of the framework that we use to develop a diagnostic to monitor collaborative governance and durability across time and across projects. So now I want to kind of dig into another diagnostic that has been developed on the Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative. So this is called the Stages of Readiness Framework. It was developed through essentially practice-based knowledge throughout years of developing and managing the Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative. This is an all lands collaborative. It covers 4 million acres in the Northern Front Range of Colorado, and it includes 8 place-based collaboratives. So it was really developed to kind of to situate collaborative governance and readiness for place-based groups, but also for large landscapes and nested collaborative groups. It's really rooted, and the reason why I wanted to bring this one up today is it's really rooted in wildland fire management and forest and fire resilience. So it's really pertinent to the CFLRP context. And while it was born in this particular place in Northern Colorado, we've kind of shopped it around and to other partners, and it seems to resonate with folks. It also obviously needs a lot more work to be done, but people seem to really have it resonate with them, and it connects to them. They can see themselves within this framework. Next slide, please. So really the central premise of this framework is that there is no future without wildland fire. So how do we ready landscapes and communities to receive and recover from fire? So related to that, we all know that collaboratives can play really important roles in preparing landscapes and communities to receive and recover from wildfire. But getting to that point of stability and capacity to play these roles in the long term requires time and it requires resources. But then we also know that collaboratives create value in very different ways as they develop, and the kinds and amount of resources that they need change over time. And what I mean by that is connecting with stakeholders around a shared vision requires a different set of resources and expertise and capacity than maybe developing a spatial strategy, which also requires different skills and needs for implementing that strategy. Next slide, please. So what this framework essentially does is it provides stage-appropriate benchmarks and outcomes of collaboratives and helps them step through those into 4 iterative overlapping stages. So the first is to establish a community of partners around a shared vision, to translate that vision into strategy, to translate that strategy into action, and then scale that impact out and sustain momentum. And it's obviously not a linear progress. Many folks are going through multiple of these stages at one time, but it still helps identify some benchmarks and potential outcomes of success at each stage. Next slide, please. So there's a number of applications for this framework. They're listed here. The first is for self-assessment and adaptation. So you can use this as a diagnostic to think through what you need and where you're going to progress within and between these stages over time. From a funding perspective, it really helps, it can help collaboratives articulate their current capacity and justify their funding needs relative to where they're at in that readiness framework. On the NOCO Fireshed, we're seeing it used to guide resource allocation between collaborative members and partners. So it may encourage some investments in collaboratives that maybe have lower capacity to engage or at a more early stage of the process. And it helps fund collaboratives proportional to where they are in that process. And then finally, inform. The figure on the right is essentially showing you a snapshot of the report and the links there. So feel free to check that out when you get the follow-up email. But it really sets up outcomes for each stage and benchmarks for success throughout those stages. So it provides a clear understanding of what are some outcomes and expectations during different stages of the process. Next stage, please. Or sorry, next slide, please. So this is my final slide here, and I just want to wrap up to say, so I just want to really clearly articulate that change is a fundamental and reoccurring aspect of collaboration. Collaboratives adapt and evolve, and as they adapt and evolve through time, the needs, the priorities, and the value and the outcomes they produce changes with time. So we need these diagnostics to help monitor changes through time and identify what those needs and milestones are relative to the current stage of the life cycle. So I introduced these two diagnostics. These aren't the only way of doing it, but they represent two diagnostics that folks can use for different purposes to track the components of good governance, identify what is working well and what needs improvement, and align capacity investments with their needs. And the goal is to identify and continue and maintain the sustainability and durability of collaboratives through time. So I think that's all I have, Jane, and I don't know how long I went, but if there's time for questions, I'm happy to take them now, or I'm happy to just wait until we hear from the other panelists.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. I think let's hold questions for the whole panel once we've gone through all the remarks.
Great.
But that's a great cue to the audience. If you have questions, you can go ahead and start entering those in the chat, and we'll make a list and have those ready to go after all of our panelists give their remarks. So thanks very much, Tyler. Great resources. We put links in the chat while you were talking, and then I think we'll also be sharing those papers in the follow-up email. I'm sure that those of us who work in the collaborative space and have worked with collaboratives over a long term resonated with a lot of the lessons and ideas in the papers. So thank you very much for that. So next up, we're going to hear from a couple of collaborative forest landscape restoration projects. We've asked our panelists to provide a really brief overview to start of their projects, including the purpose, who's involved, how they are structured to make decisions together. And then we'll have a chance to explore more with these groups through the moderated Q&A. So first up, I'd like to welcome Dana Gwynn of the Forest Stewards Guild. Dana, I'll pass it to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to share my screen, so that might take just a second to come up.
Looks good.
Sarah, can everybody good? Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the 232 partnership. You'll find out what that stands for in a moment if you don't know yet, as well as the Rio Chama CFLRP. Again, I'm Dana Gwynn. I'm the Southwest Partnership Manager at the Forest Stewards Guild, which is a 501c3 nonprofit based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I live and work in Southern Colorado, and I'm the lead coordinator and facilitator on the partner side for the 232 partnership, which is the named collaborative that works with the Rio Chama CFLRP. So I have a couple of, for brand recognition purposes, here are our two logos. Again, Rio Chama CFLRP is the largest project currently of the 232 partnership. 232 is 2 watersheds, 3 rivers, 2 states. The 2 watersheds are the Rio Grande and the San Juan watersheds. The 3 rivers, the Rio Grande, the San Juan, and the Rio Chama. And then the two states are Colorado and New Mexico. So our partnership brings folks together to work across nearly 5 million acres to plan, implement, and monitor forest and watershed projects. And I'm advancing my own slides. Here is a kind of visual of what we're looking at. On the left there, you can just get an idea of the way water moves in our landscape across the state line. There's also an inset, so you can see kind of where we're located in Southwest Colorado and northern New Mexico. On the right, you can see that the darker green outline is the 232 partnership geography. It was very much drawn with watershed connectivity in mind. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it just captures the headwaters of the Rio Grande up in the northwest portion, and the headwaters of the Rio Chama in the center, and then the headwaters of the San Juan River as well, all in southern Colorado that feed downstream communities in New Mexico. For some more regional context, the large red polygon on here is the 232 partnership. That's what you were just looking at. And then all of these other beautiful colors are all of the other wonderful collaborative initiatives and projects happening in Southwest Colorado and northern New Mexico around us. So even though we're working across a very large landscape with many, many partners, there is a lot of collaboration and partnership happening around our landscape. And so often we're working to negotiate which of those partners we're working with when it matters most, and how to understand the way that our partnership and the Rio Chama CFLRP fits into a larger regional scale, and also a culture of collaboration here in northern New Mexico and Southwest Colorado. This is unfortunately a tiny bit grainy graphic of sort of how we're organized. So I was asked to talk about who is involved, and I will say that the 232 partnership and the Rio Chama CFLRP are decentralized by design. It's a feature, not a flaw. It's very much a bottom-up organization where the place-based groups, the folks working at the community level, are helping to identify problems, challenges, and opportunities, and then feeding those up into a landscape scale strategy, not the other way around. And so while this kind of demonstrates some of how that works, this graphic doesn't even begin to capture the number of partners involved and the way that they identify those entry points that Tyler was just talking about. So, but I like this graphic because it looks like a web, and that's very much how partners that work with this project think about how we are organized. You'll see the cohesive strategy partnership, and then the Rio Chama CFLRP. We can talk a little bit more about the specific role of the Forest Stewards Guild and the Mountain Studies Institute, but we're the two organizations that push forward collaboration and communication on this project. And then we have this really cool structure where there are analogs. I'm really proud of how well staffed our CFLRP program and our partnership are. We have facilitation and coordination staff, both on the U.S. Forest Service side and on the 232 partnership side, and analogs of decision makers. Those are the U.S. Forest Service Board of Forest Supervisors and the 232 Executive Committee, which we can dig into a little bit more here when we are in questions. The last thing I'd like to say is that we have this phrase that sounds a little cheesy, but we talk about it a lot at 232 partnership meetings. And it's that without you, there's no 232. So I put some photos up of partners working together in the field, folks at meetings together, to really demonstrate how this team of teams approach comes together out on the ground. I think more important than me talking to you about how amazing our project is, that I'm really proud of, is showing the faces of the people that really are making it work. So here are some of the photos. I'm not going to go full grandma on you and tell you who everyone is and what they're doing, but these are photos that were all taken in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado during various planning sessions, field tours, and the like. They include U.S. Forest Service partners, state forestry partners, private land owners and managers, folks that work in and do watershed management, and lots of nonprofit partners as well. So I think, Sarah, with that, hopefully that was my 3 minutes, and it gave people a little bit of a taste of what our partnership is about. And with that, I can hand it over to Mike.
Yeah, great presentation. Thanks so much, Dana. Mike Croteau, please feel free to jump in with your remarks.
All right. Well, my name is Michael Croteau. I'm the Integrated Resources Staff Officer here on the Ouachita National Forest. Been here for about 5 months, so very, very new to the position in that it integrates in my program. We have silviculture, timber, wildlife, fisheries, botany, hydrology, and CFLR. So I'm super excited that McCree is be able to join us as well, because with TNC, they have been a partner for a very long time, since the inception of a lot of this work being done here in the Ouachita National Forest, here in central and western Arkansas, as well as eastern Oklahoma. So 1.8 million acres is the size of the Ouachita National Forest. But the overall collaborative, the Interior Highlands Collaborative, I'll get to that in a minute, is just the overall collaborative that involves multiple projects going on throughout the state, as well as in Oklahoma. So the genesis of the interest with the shortleaf bluestem project goes all the way back 50 years, and even beyond that, 100 to 120 years, if you consider the actions that led to the degradation of the landscape. And so, but going back 50 years with the federally listed red cockaded woodpecker. Back in 1970, even before the Endangered Species Act of 1973, what they found was that because of the habitat degradation, it was leading towards the endangerment of that species. So, and that really has been the focal species, since that time, for moving forward with restoring shortleaf pine and the bluestem ecosystem. They require mature open pine forests with trees averaging 60 to 100 years old. And so really that aim with the as the name implies, the shortleaf bluestem community is to restore that historic ecological condition that centers on a system that is dominated by mature shortleaf pine, pine hardwood, and mixed oak forest communities in the overstory, but also with a fire-adapted, floristic, rich grass and herb understory. And historically, there's red cockaded woodpecker, but there's just the ecosystem diversity that's centered around that ecosystem historically has been incredibly rich, going all the way up to the large ungulates that used to roam across this landscape in abundance. That being elk and bison. And so those species themselves have been extirpated from this region of the country, but they're slowly, coming to that point of restoring large areas of our landscape to where that could be possible. So the project has been going since its funding in 2012, and since that point, collaborative efforts have led to about 275,000 acres of restoration, moving in the direction of that desired condition. And then up to the point where we here on the Ouachita burning upwards of 70,000 acres just within the CFLR project area. The Ouachita itself, burns annually around 200,000 acres. So incredible fire program, getting fire back on the landscape. The collaborative itself, Interior Highlands, I don't know if we do, can we share? Yeah, we're going to get here to a map. So that just kind of shows not only the position of where the Ouachita National Forest is, but also the Ozark St. Francis as well. The collaborative itself covers all of Arkansas and that portion of the Ouachita National Forest in eastern Oklahoma. But we have, partnerships with organizations up in Missouri as well, and that is part of that collaboration of restoring species and sharing across boundaries. And so that a lot of the work on the shortleaf pine, even though we were listed with that red-cockaded woodpecker in the 1970s, a lot of that work really didn't start picking up until the early 1990s. Along that time, there was also some interest with restoring red oak in the state, and then since then, white oak. And so the collaborative, really began gaining steam in the early 2000s. Had certainly some roots with the Fire Learning Network and what's called the South Central FLN here in Arkansas. But really, bringing partners together with that common vision, and accomplishing work on the ground, leading to that desire and condition that we want, and bringing fire back on the landscape in that shortleaf bluestem community. So overall, the collaborative working statewide has upwards of 30 partners, ranging from state agencies within Arkansas here as well, Oklahoma and Missouri, federal agencies, NRCS, BLM, Southern Research Station, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, 5 different universities, other non-government organizations such as National Wild Turkey Foundation, Federation, Shortleaf Pine Initiative, Quail Forever, and then a major partner and collaborator with this project being the TNC. In addition to members of our timber industry, that is critical for those partnerships to get the work done on the ground. And so overall, all are playing in the success of that work that will continue, continue on into the future. CFLR project, funded through 2027. But a lot of that, partners' roles it's everything from helping out with prescribed fire. We can't do this alone. So those critical, that collaboration, those critical partnerships are absolutely essential for getting the work done. The monitoring, relocation and translocation of brown-headed nuthatch and red-cockaded woodpecker, as well as doing the treatments across the landscape, whether that's converting misplaced loblolly pine with shortleaf pine to mid-story removal and some of the other actions that we need work done on the ground. And so this overall Interior Highlands Collaborative is an incredible network of organizations, individuals with vested interest in moving our landscape into where we want it to go into the future. We also have, you can see there on the Ozark St. Francis, there is currently a CFLR project that is unfunded. That's the Ozark Highlands Ecosystem Restoration Project. So it's got a long, rich history, a lot of engagement with partners and collaborators, and excited to be a part of this. And I'm learning a lot. So that's it on my end. I probably went over 3 or 4 minutes, but hopefully that gives you all a taste of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's all right. Thanks so much, Mike, for those comments. It's always fun to hear about collaboration in that part of the country, and really appreciate your comments. So at this point, I'd like to welcome all of our panelists on screen. We'll go ahead and spotlight your videos. So that'll be Mike and as well as McCree Anderson of the Shortleaf Bluestem CFLRP, and Dana Gwynn and Jeremy Marshall representing the Rio Chama CFLRP. Bryce and Lindsay of the CFLRP National Program are also available for Q&A if we have questions that come up that they can best answer. So this is a good time to remind folks that we very much welcome audience questions during this part of the session. So if you have questions for our panelists, you can go ahead and start entering those in the chat, and we'll be monitoring those. And I will kick off the conversation with a few questions of my own. Also want the audience to feel free to offer your reflections in the chat. We know many of you have experience with these questions and themes and collaborative dynamics, so we welcome your questions and thoughts in the chat as well. Okay, so we're a pretty small group of panelists here, so I think you know, if you want to respond, you can just go ahead and chime in. If it gets busy, then we can start raising hands. And Bryce and Lindsay, if you want to get into the conversation, please go ahead and raise your hands. So first question, so for our 2 CFLRPs, what's been working for you and what has been challenging, specifically with respect to the collaborative dynamics? Maybe one thing that's been working really well and one thing that's been really challenging. Dana,
I can speak a little bit to it. We all have who's going first concept, but you know, I didn't mention, and while Mike was talking, the Rio Chama CFLRP just was funded last year. So this is kind of cool to have a CFLRP from the central part of the country that's been at work for a long time, and then the Rio Chama that is new, but has a history of collaboration since around 2016, at least at the landscape scale in this area. So one thing that I will say that's working well is that despite the complexity of our partnership area and our CFLRP, we're engaged with 4 different national forests: the San Juan, the Rio Grande, the Carson, and the Santa Fe. 2 of those national forests are in U.S. Forest Service Region 2, and 2 of them are in U.S. Forest Service Region 3. So you can imagine the administrative complexities that might come with that. But the partnership and the CFLRP were specifically designed to plan, implement, and monitor work on the ground based on the landscape needs and the needs of communities first, and then to manage the jurisdictional challenges second. And I feel as though our U.S. Forest Service partners are committed to coming to the table and having those conversations, thinking about creative ways to do contracting, thinking about creative ways to work on different agreements so that we can really move those things forward. And one of the things that's working especially well for us is that we have a full staff of Forest Service personnel. Jeremy Marshall, my counterpart at the Forest Service, is coordinating the Rio Chama CFLRP. We have a public information officer on the CFLRP. We have a data manager and a GIS person on the CFLRP, and we have a project coordinator, Sandy Dingman. So that is incredibly helpful just to be moving things forward in a way that works well. There's 2 sides of that coin. There's a lot of challenges that come with those jurisdictional complexities, including data sharing, making that data collate and accessible to collaborative partners so that they can make informed decisions and influence conversations in the ways that they would like to. So maybe I'll stop there. Jeremy, I don't know if you have anything to add, or if other folks want to.
Yeah, I'll certainly add to that. Region 2 and Region 3 have very different cultures. Just even moving money across regions, it's painful. You know, I could Venmo anybody here money right now, but literally we had $1 million sent back this last year from Region 2 to Region 3 just to do a hiccup. So there's just things like that, and different monitoring standards and models from each region, which has been challenging, things like that. But I think, you know, overall, I think my staff as well as the collaborative, we're dedicated to finding solutions and just working through that stuff. But you know, the Forest Service is very much funded in silos, and it's just really hard to break those down. But we're trying to do our best. So.
Any comments from our friends on the shortleaf bluestem CFLRP? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can go. I'm not sure if I exactly remember the question, but what's working, what's not. You know, we're blessed. We have had a really good collaborative run so far. We've moved through a lot of staff turnover in our federal partners, which I thought was going to be chaos. Every time somebody left, I would be like, oh my gosh, but we'd get a new person in. we would do what I saw formalized, an onboarding meeting. I saw that in the previous presentation. Great. Yeah, we did that. So we, without even thinking, just to kind of get the history, getting people up to speed. So I think our collaborative's great. External challenges, you know, that's a big one. That's the big one that kind of sweeps over us and we have little no control over. Wildfires, everybody going out west, you know, here in Arkansas, everybody works out west on the wildfires. Government shutdown. Yeah, so hunting seasons, both for deer and turkey, limiting our prescribed fire season. So lots of things like that externally that we have a vision for the landscape, but have challenges completely implementing our efforts.
Great. Yeah, thanks for those responses. I'm going to move to another question, and I'm actually going to fold in. We had a question in the chat that I'm going to fold into this one. One of the themes in Tyler's presentation was around change and the need to sort of be proactive in managing for change in collaborative. So would love to hear what changes have you experienced over time with your collaborative effort and how have you managed those? So for example, you might be able to speak to turnover. We know that can be a challenge. Collaborative fatigue over the long haul. And the question in the chat is around recruiting new members and any tips for sort of recruiting and refreshing that membership over time. I know Rio Chama is a little newer, so anyway, not sure if you feel like you have reflections on that question just yet.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing is, you know, Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon last year was definitely a game changer for us. And part of our project proposal was certainly to get a lot of, you know, large acres of fire back in the landscape. And that certainly has slowed us down. And we really had to rely on our partners to really be the messenger. We had pretty much zero political capital. So that certainly has affected our project and something that we didn't plan for. So I'll just throw that out there in the room. So
I can add to what Jeremy's saying. So although our CFLR project is new, our partnership isn't as new. And so even the turnover and the challenges associated with that ahead of the receipt of CFLRP funds still impacted the way that we work together. One of the things that I would like to kind of bring to the forefront is we talk a lot about personnel challenges and capacity within federal agencies and U.S. Forest Service partners, but we've actually also observed the same challenges associated with non-federal partners and nonprofit partners. So for example, we're in a process, I told you we work across 3.8 million acres. That's an incredibly large area to apply $3 million a year well, and we want to be stacking and leveraging those funds and multiplying them and keeping that money here in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. And in our kind of quest to figure out where we can get the best bang for our buck, we've devised a number of different processes, and those processes have legitimately been interrupted by more so turnover and changing of positions and responsibilities on the partnership side. And so I also want to kind of daylight that and bring that to the forefront, that it's not just our federal agencies and partners that struggle with that. It's also sometimes our nonprofit partners and other groups in the landscape. And when they are carrying, we want to be kind of carrying one another. And when those groups are carrying some of those heavier projects or more involved pieces, especially when it comes to public engagement and outreach to lots of partners. Like your nonprofit partners are the people who have the Frito pie money. That's how we get people to the table. And so when those people change, or when the faces change, the relationships change, that can also be disruptive. And we have experienced that here in Rio Chama. McCree, you're really nodding like you agree. So maybe I'll pass the mic to you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just excited, but yeah, I agree. All of those points are valid, and we have experienced that. You know, I've been doing this for 23 years in this collaborative, and I've seen so many people leave and go and grow and get new positions and do new things and move up, you know, in their careers. And my job description's never changed. So maybe I'm the one that needs to change, but yeah, that's barbecue. I put that in the chat. You know, having meetings is key to getting people there and excited. But yeah, fatigue is real. And then you have the turnover factor, and you've got to figure out, you know, how to keep moving.
So Sarah, can I chime in just real quick?
Please.
So just about the piece around turnover, McCree, you mentioned having onboarding workshops. That's a really key component. And the other thing is just having like a buddy system or mentoring, having redundancy in these roles and positions. It's not really efficient financially, but you need to have that redundancy. So when folks leave, that other folks can come right in and understand the context of the collaboration in that local place. And then the other thing that I'd like to mention that hasn't been said yet is, because collaboratives are dynamic and evolve and change is so constant, when you lose people, we always talk with collaborators that I work with, some in Colorado and elsewhere, but taking stock of what are the capacities you lost, and maybe those capacities you lost are not necessarily the same capacities you need moving forward. So really think about what are those capacities that you need now versus in the future, and try to fill those positions for your future goals.
Tyler, I'll tag on one final thing. Just expressing gratitude very frequently to the people that show up to your meetings, whether or not you're feeding them chili bake is just really important. The people that are sharing their knowledge, your research partners, the people that are hosting you at their senior center, the folks that popularized your meeting in the local newspaper, like those people deserve a phone call, a written thank you note. And then it's amazing because the way that you manage gratitude and do it honestly helps you be really effective regionally, because people talk, people know if you're a good group to work with, and if your partnership is about caring about people and their time.
Awesome. Those are great responses to that question. I want to acknowledge a question in the chat about neutral facilitation, pointing out that it can be really hard to find those folks in rural communities. There are folks out of state with those skill sets, but you know, it can be pretty pricey when you're hiring an out-of-state facilitator to work with a collaborative group. So question about training programs for facilitators. I put one resource in the chat. I know that Southwest Decision Resources is a group out of Arizona that provides training around facilitation. That might be a good place to look. If there's other resources folks know about training programs for facilitation and collaboration coordination, please feel free to add those to the chat as well. And I would just ask of our panelists, anything you would add there around how your group has found facilitation resources or trained people to serve in those roles where you are?
I feel like maybe I'm speaking too much. I often, I think about this a lot because I am a facilitator, but I'm also a coordinator, and a huge part of successful collaboration is getting lots of different voices in the room to the table at different points in time. And so I think often about the fact that I'm a non-neutral facilitator in the 232 partnership space, and I want to own that and let people know that. And I think that neutrality is very much meaning that you are attached to the outcome of a process. So, and I want the 232 partnership and the Rio Chama CFLRP process to be successful. I want us to achieve the objectives that are written down in this CFLRP proposal. And so while I'm facilitating a meeting, I try my best to ensure that I don't have a desired outcome for that event, but I try to also communicate clearly to partners that I have a vested interest in us moving the project forward and accomplishing the big picture goals that we've set out for ourselves as a group. So I don't know if that helps necessarily with you know, how do you train more people to do that? But I think that lots of different people are in a position to bring partners to the table and to facilitate a meeting if you have a certain skill set, but also being self-aware of where you sit in relationship to the outcomes of those processes and being honest with partners about that is really critical.
Great.
Yeah, we don't have actually a paid facilitator. We work with our Forest Service partners to kind of tag team the meetings, keeping the flow going. Yeah, so there are times when I think that it would be very effective to have somebody that could, you know, I don't know what that is, but like make it really shake things up for a meeting or two. I think that'd be super cool.
Yeah, and maybe just from the perspective of kind of the first 10 years of CFLRP, what we saw a lot of was just a huge variety in the type and timing of facilitation. So a lot of groups would self-facilitate, a lot of groups would rotate through facilitators, some groups would have facilitation during certain times throughout the tenured process, and others hire a paid facilitator. And it really just depends on that local context and history. And I think really having someone, I think Dana alluded to this a little bit, but someone who can really command respect and trust among the group is that really important kind of glue to bring folks together.
Wonderful. I also noticed folks put some other great resources in the chat, including trainings through the National Center for Environmental Collaboration and Conflict Resolution, and some other ideas there. So thanks for your responses there. Dana showed that great map in her presentation with the multiple nested collaborative efforts within the 232 partnership. And I wanted to return to that theme and because I know that's an increasingly a challenge for CFLRPs, also for wildfire crisis strategy landscapes are being formed in areas where there's multiple existing collaborative efforts. So I'd like to invite any reflections on sort of the challenges and opportunities that those kinds of nested collaborative efforts face. Any thinking around how decision space needs to be defined when that's the case, or other things that folks can do to, try to ensure success in that situation where you have multiple collaborative groups kind of operating on the same landscape.
I can start off at least from just a logistical thing. Right now we have the Enchanted Circle, which is on the Carson National Forest east side of the forest. We have the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative as well as the Southwest CFRP. So it really kind of takes a little bit of oxygen out of at least the Rio Chama, at least the Enchanted Circle, in terms of they get about $17 million a year and we get $3 million. So it has changed at least some of those practical dynamics at least. To speak to that. So.
Thanks, Jeremy.
We have, these nested collaboratives. I think I talked about how the 232 is designed as a team of teams. The reason that the partnership exists is that place-based groups decided specifically that they wanted to go big to attract resources to a historically underfunded area in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, and that in order to do that, as well as address and plan for landscape scale disturbance, that we needed to be working at a larger scale. And so our place-based collaboratives and community groups are often committed to elevating and kind of collating similar concerns so that we can be competitive for funds and resources on a national and regional scale, and to bring those to this area. Those partners are also really critically important, as long as we're communicating well, to putting those dollars to good use once we have them. Those smaller scale partners are the ones that are actually taking the money and applying it and doing in-stream restoration or completing a fuels treatment in a community. And so without those partners, although it's complex, having that network of communication about who's doing what with what types of resources and who can offer what to the greater goal. Like, while sometimes I get frustrated about the number of coalitions and collaboratives and meetings, it's thinking about where the niche is for your group and your partners, and then how to take a step forward together. I would rather have there be more attention on these issues than less. And I think that's where we're headed, even though it can sometimes be a communication snafu. And in the 232, we have this executive committee that has a lot of those folks on it. And so they're talking, the leadership of these different place-based groups and coalitions are talking to each other regularly. And we're doing our best. I'm not saying it's perfect, but that's kind of how I view that.
Yeah, we're not as complex, excuse me, we're not as complex as that model that you said. We have a broader collaborative, the leadership in the state is all together. And then to help implement a lot of the on the ground work, we have, smaller teams and smaller NGOs or partner organizations that do activities kind of to help build up some of the outcomes of the CFLR. So it's really cool because when we have our meetings, our workshops, it's basically like what's been going on. And so everybody gets to spend 10-15 minutes providing updates, and then what work and what not, and then things they need to the table. So we get a lot of the information put together all at one place, and learning what everybody's doing, and then make an action plan for the next 6 months. So that's been our way of doing stuff.
Great. Thank you, Dana and McCree. Shifting gears just a little bit, we're anticipating our next session for this peer learning session series will be around adaptive management. So would love to hear from this set of collaborative practitioners and experts. How do you incorporate data from monitoring into collaborative conversations to inform and drive future management? Yeah, I'll pause there.
Okay, I'm going to go again. So this is cool because this is a place where you can fall in a black hole. So our collaborative, we're tracking desired ecological condition, right? Like how we're changing the landscape. So we have a landscape scale monitoring program like everybody has, and then after we do the monitoring, we do plant community monitoring. So we measure trees, shrubs, and grasses and forbs on the whole shebang in different ecotypes across the landscape, in all the different treatments. And then our ecologists go back, do that analysis, and then the following year, it takes like a year, right? The following year, we do a report of the changes in the landscape, and then we actually have a series of presentations that we give to the leadership team or at the collaborative meeting. Now, does that create my rub here is, does that actually create change, and is that an adaptive management feedback loop? So I'm not sure it is, but we're trying our best to figure that one out.
And I can maybe chime in and offer an example from a non-CFLRP landscape, but one that I've been heavily embedded in on the Grand Mesa, Uncompahgre, and Gunnison National Forest. It's a vegetation management project called the Spruce Beetle Epidemic Aspen Decline Management Response, the longest acronym SPEEDMR I've ever seen for a vegetation management project. But some ways in which that they incorporate monitoring into the collaborative. First and foremost is the commitment to collaborative adaptive management was codified into NEPA. So the Forest Service had to abide by this regulation to be partners in collaborative implementation throughout the process. And some of the things we were building the ship as we sailed it, but some of the things that really came out of this that was an effective way to link monitoring to the collaborative was developing essentially a matrix that links what are the desired goals of the collaborative What are the monitoring questions? What are the results to date? How has the science team interpreted these results? And then how does the collaborative group respond to those interpretations from the scientists, and how will that inform management moving forward? So there's this feedback between the desired conditions, the scientists and the science team that's funded to do the monitoring, and the collaborative group getting to understand or getting to provide feedback on what monitoring results they're seeing and what actions need to be taken.
Great. Yeah. So kind of having a process in place to think through how all of those pieces fit together.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just kind of building upon what McCree had said, you know, he and I had some of this even conversation today about, okay, you know, looking at some of the timing of when we do our prescribed fire, when we do our burns, and looking at the seasonality of that in the historic regime. When did those occur? And of course, it overlaps with, you know, what some of the things that, you know, McCree had brought up earlier, as far as, you know, that timing of when resources are available, and you know, the social license to be able to do some of that work. But really, you know, through that monitoring, you know, some of that might be indicating that, yeah, we really need to push into some of the, you know, different seasonalities of when we do our prescribed fire, because of the monitoring results that we're finding. We don't want to be a detriment to the ecosystem that we're trying to get to that desired condition by putting that fire on the ground just because we're getting the fire on the ground. We want to do it at the right time and the right scale. And so that it is very important to be looking at that data. And I will be the first to admit that us as a Forest Service, we can do better at monitoring. And we are so grateful to our partners with, you know, through this, you know, these collaborative efforts, that being able to beef up our monitoring and be able to do the ecological right thing for the landscape. So it's yeah, I'm excited about, you know, further conversations about the monitoring and things and what it's showing us.
Great.
I'm gonna add here, and tell me if I can shut up, but what really makes the monitoring successful for us is the district staff at the different locations on the Ouachita National Forest, because it's a joint effort. We show up, they've got their stuff, they've got their vehicles, we've got our vehicles, and yeah, I mean, we couldn't, and they all know where the plots are. And I mean, it's like a week-long process and 15 to 20 people going out every day, 12 hours a day, conducting the plant community monitoring. And so we couldn't do it without the staff and the commitment of the staff on the forest, from the timber markers to the fire shop. So yeah, it goes both ways.
If you don't mind my adding, Sarah, we're talking a lot, and I feel like maybe this is just something that's ingrained, but we talk a lot about ecological monitoring, but I think a lot about the fact that over half of the questions in the common monitoring strategy for CFLRP are actually socioeconomic monitoring questions. And so thinking through, and I don't want to be too bold, because the Rio Chama just finished its first year of monitoring under the common monitoring strategy. And I just talked with Tyler yesterday about how to develop an adaptive management strategy, and we're about to have our first meeting around that in February. We have a monitoring committee that is very much dedicated to the monitoring committee, helped write the monitoring plan that I dropped into the chat. So it was collaboratively completed in that way over the course of many, many meetings. And now we are implementing it. And McCree, it's interesting to listen to you talk about how the district staff is so critical to collecting data. And I agree with that. And we also have lots of nonprofit partners and other research partners in our landscape that are collecting data and contributing to our plan for us as well. And the socioeconomic monitoring, honestly, is just a ton of phone calls and building relationships with wood products producers and other contractors in the landscape to understand just how well you're using your CFLR dollars as a magnet to leverage and attract other money into the landscape. And so I can't speak too much to, you know, what the solution to adaptive management is on Rio Chama, because we're standing at the beginning of the road, not the other end, but we're doing our best to talk with with partners and see what we can do to make it effective. And I thought, Tyler, about those 4 kind of squares you had at the top of one of your slides, and there are different roles to play there. Like, I'm going to be incorporating and leading conversations around this with the collaborative group, but we have, scientists and other folks that are working within our monitoring committee, and that's their space that they get to own. And then they're distilling the synthesized information and helping me understand how best to present it. So having a good team that understands where you're trying to get without having a foregone conclusion in mind, I think is important. But ask me again in a couple of years and maybe we'll know better.
Great reflections. So we have a couple questions left in the chat and I want to get to them, but recognizing that we're running out of time, I'm just going to direct each one to one panelist for a quick answer. And perhaps these are themes we'll pick up in future sessions. So Tyler, the question is, what are some thoughts on the tension between formal and informal collaborative structures and governance? Does effective sustained collaboration require formalized structure and governance, or can less formally organized groups be successful?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll try to answer it, but hopefully some of the other panelists can jump in. So a lot of the early kind of theory and practice around this was suggesting that at some point to be durable and sustained throughout time, you need more kind of a centralized system. But there's also a lot of counter arguments to that. When you have these groups that are much more decentralized and it's the local culture and history has been that way for years, trying to centralize a system in a place that hasn't been that way can actually cause harm, and you end up spending a lot more time on the administrative task and not getting the work done on the ground. So this is not going to be the best answer, but it really depends. And I think that you can have durable collaboration that lasts through time that are either formal or informal.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Tyler. And the last question, and I'm going to direct this one to McCree. What was your biggest barrier to getting prescribed fire on the ground, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I didn't do it. That's a hard question because it's a lot of different factors. All right. Specifically for the Ouachitas, I could talk bigger about some other the things that the collaborative is in, but this is for the Ouachitas. The Ouachitas, they have a mission, and it's to restore and maintain the habitat and build the habitat out of the RCWs, the red-cockaded woodpeckers. So they have a strategic mission to do that. To get more prescribed fire on the ground requires, lots of things: money, people, and weather, really. And you can get the money, then you can order the people, and then you've got to deal with the weather. And we know that, at least we know here in Arkansas, that over the last few years we've become more a little bit weather. Let me say that in the springtime. And so I think our burn windows for like optimum prescribed burning, when we can do it socially, we've had some wet years. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I will say one more thing is that a public education and outreach strategy we did a long time ago. And so when the Forest Service started putting up a lot of smoke in the air, our public in the state of Arkansas was ready. They were ready to receive that ready to see it and see like, okay, they're just burning. That was a big, and we're still doing it now. We have the social license and we've got to keep it. So yeah, it was building that media outreach and public education campaign that really had started us on a way forward.
Wonderful. And that's a theme I'd love to pick up on in future sessions around, who's your broader community that you need to communicate with through these efforts. So we're at time. So I'm going to hand it over to Bryce Esch for some closing comments and close us out. Just want to say thanks to everybody. Please keep your eye out for that follow-up email or the poll that'll come up when you close the Zoom, and take a minute or two to fill that out for us. Bryce, I'm going to pass it over to you.
I just want to echo your comments, Sarah, and give thanks to everyone who attended today, contributed resources and questions in the chat, and then, of course, to our panelists who really put a lot of thought into, how they wanted to tell you about the context of their projects. And then, we're game to kind of take these questions and answer some things off the cuff. And I think someone mentioned earlier today that, we really can't do this work without the partnerships. And I think, that is definitely true of the work that happens on the ground, but it's true of the work that happens in sessions like these too. So it really is the community coming together that makes peer learning sessions really valuable for everyone. And also big thanks to Jane and Sarah for all their coordination and facilitation. So yeah, really looking forward to the next one and seeing you all there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope we see you next time. Bye.